excited you all are here today, and we're very excited about this topic as well. So, if you are joining us in the audience, let us know where you're joining from. If you're a job seeker, please let yourself be known because we have some recruiters here who are going to be interested in seeking some new talent. And just let us know what you're excited to hear about today. All of you are here to join us for ACE the Interview Strategies for Women in Sales. We are going to be talking all about interviewing, helping you get some of the best tips, tricks, pieces of advice, ways to avoid pitfalls. So we're going to cover a ton of ground today, and I'm really excited about this conversation. This event would not have been possible without the partnership of Samsara, who's been amazing to work with throughout this whole year. And I am Alexine Moudawar, CEO of Women in Sales, and we are the largest global community for women in the field of sales. We provide educational resources, materials, events, anything you can think of that's going to help support women in their sales career. And we love to feature and highlight amazing women that are already in our field today who are succeeding. So I'm going to actually pass first for introductions to Maggie. Maggie, if you can introduce yourself, but also Samsara, so that anybody who's in the audience who might not be familiar can become familiar.
Sure. So I'm Maggie Wilson. Thanks all for being here. I have been with Samsara about 4.5 years, and I am the manager of the mid-market sales team for the public sector division. And if you're not familiar with who Samsara is, we are a connected operations platform. So it's basically a fancy term for we help our customers make sure that their assets, anything that they own or manage, is safe and can be used efficiently and effectively. And so we provide an Internet of Things technology to essentially provide an all-in-one solution for our customers, whether it ranges from food and beverage to construction to public sector, oil and gas, and more.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Excited to have you here. Liz, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, thank you. I'm Liz Klein. I am the Director of Commercial and Mid-Market for Canada in Samsara. I've been with Samsara for about 2 years now. Maggie gave a perfect overview of who we are and what we do in the market, but excited to be here today.
Amazing. So happy to have you. Lauren, if you can introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Hassett. I lead our enterprise core sales engineering team. I've been at Samsara for about 6.5 years. So excited to be here today.
Amazing. And Megan, last but definitely not least, introduce yourself, please.
Yes, thank you. My name is Megan. I am a manager for commercial US here, and I'm based in Florida, and I've been with Samsara for just over 3 years now.
Amazing. Such a great crew here today. I'm excited for this conversation. As a quick heads up, you're going to see a link in the chat here a couple different times. I am dropping the open jobs link for Samsara. This link is specific to women in sales. This lets their team know that you are coming in from women in sales, and more specifically from this event, which is going to be really powerful for them to see. So make sure if you're going to be applying before, after, during this event to use this link that we just dropped in the chat to make sure that the team sees you. And we're going to kick off in a fun way, a little bit different way. We're going to start with interview kind of memories. We're going to think backwards to some of those memories. It could be funny. It could be something exciting. It could be something, like whatever from an interview that you had in the past. But what is the most memorable interview that you personally had? And we'll kick off with you, Megan, for this one.
I think about the most memorable one I ever had, probably when I was a interviewee, like not the hiring manager. I remember I had my dog in the background was playing with a squeaky toy, and I thought it was going to be on Zoom, but it was actually a phone call. And I think it might've been with Samsara actually. And anyway, she was squeaking it. In my head, I'm thinking they don't hear it. It blurs out the background noise. And then the interviewer asked me if I had pet birds because of, I guess, the noise it was making. After that, I realized that maybe we need to put the squeaky toys away during work hours, but still remember that one years later.
Hey, you landed the role, right? So, I mean, that's a win. Win is a win. Lauren, what about you?
Yeah, actually, one of my favorites was when I was interviewing someone to join our sales engineering team a few years ago. When they joined the call, I noticed in the background they had one of those really large stuffed animals. It was a stuffed baby Yoda. And I actually had the same exact one in my background. But we didn't actually acknowledge it the entire interview until the very end. And it was such a fun way, I think, to kind of like release some of the nerves and tension at the end, was like just a call out of that we had the exact same thing in our background, the exact same giant baby Yoda. It was a really funny connection point.
That is hilarious. What are the chances too? And I'm also a Baby Yoda fan, so love it. Maggie, what about you?
I don't know if I have any really fun stories like that. So I guess just one that comes to mind in terms of like in a moment, I guess, when I was interviewing early on is in my career was I was interviewing with several different companies, and so I was having some notes to the side and trying to remember my different research that I had prepared. And I realized in one of the interviews I had gotten it mixed up with another company, including like the competitors. I had the wrong competitors. I had the wrong, I was confused on like which interview I was on. So like that was like a uh-oh moment and a learning moment for me that I will definitely never forget.
Love it. What about you, Liz?
Yeah, mine's actually in the same vein as Maggie. I think the most memorable interview I had was when I was an SDR, and this was back in the day when we were having interviews in person, if you can believe it. I remember going to the office and meeting with the recruiter. I felt as though I prepared well to meet with the recruiter, but lo and behold, the hiring manager and the hiring manager's manager, pop into the interview and say, hey, why don't we just hold our interviews now? And I remember that feeling, that stark, sobering feeling of being, underprepared. And I think I remember that interview because it was like a big lesson learned for me moving forward, and just controlling the things that you can control and showing up to interviews, with the utmost preparedness and being ready for anything. So that one's already stuck with me. And I feel like I really learned some lessons that I applied moving forward to my interviews over the years.
Amazing. I love it. Yeah. So the TLDR is we're all human. Interview things happen. I rarely share my my interview trauma, but one of the first companies I ever worked for, they had a staircase going up to the second floor, which was where the SVP and all the leadership of sales worked. And so I had to go with the interviewer up the stairs, and I actually tripped and face planted walking up the stairs. And I popped up and just tried to pretend like nothing happened. And I'll never forget his facial expression. He was like horrified. But I actually ended up landing the role because I just never spoke of it again. I continued my interview. I had like a great interview afterwards, and I was their top sales rep within a year. So you can quite literally face plant interview and still pull it together if you really put your heart into it. And then you can just cringe about it for the rest of your life afterwards. So, well, we are going to dive into today's conversation. As we go through this, if you have questions, if you're in the chat and you would like to ask those, we're going to share some, we're going to save some time towards the end of the conversation. So drop those in the Q&A. Let us know what your questions are, and we will try to get to any and all of those questions. So we're going to start at the beginning of interviews. And I feel like this is one of those questions that we don't hear enough about. And that's the level of preparation and kind of research that interviewees should be going through ahead of time. Because I sometimes see advice on LinkedIn and it's so specific, like, oh, you need to spend like hours preparing. But some of our women in sales community members, they might be interviewing with 20 different companies simultaneously. So for them to spend, 2 to 4 hours prepping isn't always realistic. So can each of you take us through your understanding of what the amount of prep time, the amount of prep work and research that you believe should be put into preparing for interviews? And Lauren, let's start with you for this one.
Yeah, definitely a critical part of the interview process for sure. I think that there is quite an extensive amount that should go into it, especially if it's something that you're really passionate about as far as getting that role. And I think that some things that people might forget is in the preparation is not only the company that you're interviewing for, but also the person you're interviewing with, and knowing which role they have and what they might be doing and what their day-to-day things are, so that you can kind of get a better idea of what they might be able to provide value-wise to you when you're interviewing. So it's also just researching the person you're interviewing with. The second thing is, again, not just the company, but the product itself, right? Like, what is the value that product is providing to other people? What makes it so exciting? Why is it so valuable, and why does it have such an effect on their customers? And I think one thing that can go into that is just reading the blogs, reading some of the latest announcements and news for that company. So not just like the company about, but like doing really a lot of deep dive search on like their LinkedIn and other things that are really top of mind for them right now, can really set you apart when you come to interviewing, and knowing not just what the company is, but their background, what is most exciting to them right now, the product itself, and more. It shows a lot more dedication and motivation from our side.
Love it. Absolutely. Maggie, what about you?
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I think so. One of the things that Lauren called out that I tend to find gets missed is folks might do research on the company, but they maybe don't look at the LinkedIn profile or do research of the people that they're interviewing with. So I think it's just a good reminder of, if you want to stand out, right? Because all of the other folks that are interviewing for the same role are going to also be doing, hopefully, their research. So how can you stand out? So I think that's a good reminder to do research on the people interviewing you. But I think also we have a luxury today that we maybe didn't several years ago with AI, where you can ask AI to give you some information on the company, on what the value is of the solution, of like what are the company values. I think those are things that are important to do, that it can be just a very quick AI, Google search that can do some of that legwork for you. So I think the hardest part is like, okay, you could do all this research, but how do you make sure that you show you did that research in the interview? Mm-hmm. So I think weaving it into questions you ask, weaving it into your about me, making sure you show in that interview that you actually did do the research. I think sometimes that's a missing piece there.
Absolutely. Absolutely agreed. Liz, what about you?
Yeah, I'm aligned with Lauren and Maggie. I'm a big proponent of like over preparedness. I think in interviews, there's so many things beyond your control, right? Who is interviewing you? What questions are they going to ask? What examples are they going to prompt you to provide in real time? I think one of the things you can control in the interview process is, the research that you've done prior to that conversation. I love what Maggie said about using AI, right? We talked about, some people might be interviewing at 3, 4, 5, 10 places at once. How can you use AI to kind of scale your research and understanding of different companies? But what I find most important is what Maggie just highlighted. How can you show me throughout the interview your research and make those connections between the company, our customers, and why you want to work, at somewhere like Samsara? And that becomes really clear throughout the interview, the preparation that you put in as you're able to thread that needle and include some of that research in your answers. So.
Absolutely. Megan, what about you?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with what everybody has said so far. And I would double down on, do you know the product? Not expecting you to be an expert, right? But taking a little bit of time to actually look at what solutions do we, or what problems do we solve? What are our products? I find it more common that people will come to the interview talking about, I really want to work at Samsara because X, Y, and Z, more related to company culture, growth, which is great. I'm glad that you're excited about that. But then I like to, not to give away my questions, but I like to ask, like, what's a grocery store near you? How would Samsara help a grocery store near you? And so many people are stumped. And not expecting you to be an expert. And it's okay if you get it like a little bit off, but just show that you did the research and you have some sort of idea. Goes a long way. And we can teach you specifics and everything when you're here, but just showing that you put in that effort.
Absolutely. Such great advice here. Already seeing some questions come in, so please keep posting those. I also dropped a link in to a resource that I created, a few years back when I was interviewing. And that's an interview cheat sheet. It basically helped me to just have everything that I wanted to cover on one sheet, and I could have it kind of nearby or in front of me or digitally if I was on a virtual interview. Basically a few sections about company background, interviewer background, and some questions that I wanted to ask. So if you're someone there, you're going to get a little nervous in the interview, help yourself out, put a few pieces of that research in front of you, just in case you stumble and get stuck. And I always recommend no more than one sheet. Otherwise you're going to be scrambling, looking for information, and it starts to show in the interview. So hopefully that'll be a good resource for all of you. And if others have resources that are in the audience here today, please add those as well, because we love sharing this information. We want our community members to get access to that too. So as we move forward, we are going to talk about Zoom etiquette, Zoom interview etiquette, if you will. This has been a hot button topic of debate. Basically, the idea of what do we need to do to prepare for Zoom interviews, because the world shifted really quickly. We used to do all of our interviews in person. That's now changed. So can each of you just talk to us a little bit about what recommendations you have as you're thinking about how folks are showing up to interviews via Zoom, and also help let people know where there might be some pitfalls, squeaky toys, things of that nature. I think those are all great examples just so we can have some awareness. So Liz, we'll kick off with you for this one.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, like we did ahead of this webinar today, we came on early, right? We know in the world of technology, sometimes Zoom's not working, internet, just making sure from an etiquette perspective, you're going to show up on time. And for me, when I'm interviewing people, I like to join 2-3 minutes early, because I also want to respect the person that I'm interviewing and make sure that I'm there on time. Beyond that, I think of the little things like the placement of your camera, the lighting, right? All those things collectively come together to portray what I call your executive presence, right? Slouching down, sitting up straight, making sure that the vision of your camera is in a good lens so that you feel as though you're communicating, especially in this remote world where we want to make sure we can see and look each other in the eye, and it feels as though we might be talking in the same room. So I think some of those small pieces are sometimes overlooked. And I find that I have the best, most thoughtful conversations with people that I'm looking at with good lighting, that are sitting up straight. And it almost can feel for a minute like we are in a room, hopefully like it used to be, having an interview. So those would be kind of my top tips.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. What about you, Megan? Anything to add to that?
Yeah, to Liz's point of earlier of control your controllables, right? So I think I'm not necessarily looking for perfection or anything like that, but just effort. And when it comes to presentation, like, did you put on a blouse? Did you, think about it ahead of time, join ahead of time? So pretty much everything that Liz said there, I would agree with. And just more so, like, are you portraying that you care about this interview, that you thought about it ahead of time, you made some, changes in your day, so that way you're best prepared for it. And I would say too, kind of to my point earlier, don't sweat the small stuff. Like if your dog's barking in the background, maintenance knocking at your door or something, just try to roll with the punches, try to minimize those things, but don't feel like that's going to, we understand life happens. It's not going to make or break the interview, but more so how you deal with those situations.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if something does come up, you're exactly right. You want to be able to recover in the moment, because stuff's going to come up in sales. As a seller, we're getting hit with things that are unexpected on a daily basis. So to be honest, when something does go a little awry, it's actually a good way for an interview to see how you act on your toes. So, yeah, always focus on just moving ahead. Lauren, what about you?
Yeah, I definitely all really great points already out of here. A lot of things are already top of mind for me as well, especially just how you present yourself, kind of what you're wearing. I think sometimes we kind of lose focus on that in the remote world, and we're not thinking about it as much, being at home a lot more. And I want to reiterate that it's still very important to how you present yourself and on a call or on a Zoom meeting, an interview. The only other thing I would really add to that is I've been shocked by some interviews I get on, and the room behind them is messy or very disorganized, and it's got a lot of things going on. And I would just say that, Zoom has great technology and other platforms for virtual backgrounds and that kind of thing. So I would just keep that in mind as well in terms of your background, because that can be super distracting, and also say a couple different things about, who you are as a person, and that kind of thing can really start the interview off on the wrong foot if the background is just very disorganized.
Absolutely. And if you have those trophies and awards, you stick those right behind you. This used to be my interview background. It still is to this day. I don't do interviews anymore, but highly recommend getting those inside, because that's a really quick talking point when you're on with a leader too. So much good advice here. Thank you all for sharing. We're going to dive into questions a little bit. I think the scariest, it's not even a question, it's always a statement on interviews, is the dreaded "tell me about yourself," because it's so innocuous. It's like, do you want to hear about my life? Do you want to hear about my career journey? But it's such a scary little statement question bundled in one. So we're going to dive into this, because I think this is one that really it oftentimes comes up first when we're on an interview, and it can kind of catch you sometimes off guard a little bit. So let's talk about how we respond to that, how we best prepare, and ensure that we have a personal elevator pitch at the ready. And then even kind of taking it a layer deeper, talking about how we can succinctly kind of explain what role we're in and what our product is, which without kind of droning on and on. So Megan, let's start with you for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So for the tell me about yourself, I would definitely stick to, if you're given guidelines around that, when I ask that question, I usually go first to give some type of structure that they're able to follow. And I typically say, 30 to 60-second background on yourself. A lot of people don't stick to to that timeline and will go off on I don't want to say oversharing, but go way off. There's going to be other times in the interview when you can cover that stuff. So just try to, be succinct. I think of it a little bit like, on resumes, when sometimes people have like an objective on the top of their resume of like what they're looking for, a little bit about their background, like a couple sentences there. Basically like that, and maybe throw in like a personal fun fact where you're based out of. That's how I look at it. And then I would say for the, what was the second part of succinctly ask about their current role? Was that it?
Yeah, mostly like talking about their current role or product, because that can kind of turn into the same thing where it just like snowballs into this really long answer. So just being able to like succinctly tell someone exactly what it is you do and what you sell.
Yeah, I look at that as a very important part of the interview. If you're going to be pitching our product, so I want you to be able to simplify what you are currently selling. And I would say a pitfall there sometimes is speaking in industry terms that I'm not familiar with, and I'm not in the same industry as you. So being aware of that way I know that you'll be aware with our customers of breaking things down. I think it can help to write out like bullet points beforehand of like what you're going to talk about, and then maybe go back and highlight what words are industry specific terms that I need to simplify or explain, or maybe call a friend who's in a completely different industry than you and try to explain what you do in a nutshell, and make sure that it's able to be understood by somebody who's not who doesn't do what you do for a living every day.
Yes, absolutely. And pro tip, great way to practice that is someone who is quite literally not in your industry. So if you're with friends, try to explain to them what you do, especially if they don't work in tech, and it is incredibly challenging. Or better yet, if you're talking to a child, try to understand what you do in terms that they would understand. That is one of the hardest exercises you can do, and a great way to prepare for those types of questions too. So wonderful advice. Lauren, what would you add here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing I would add to that is just to be excited, right? Like I've get on a lot of interviews, and asking that question sometimes, just if there's like a very monotonous tone or just a very laid back approach to it of their background and who they are, it really kind of turns me off in the first few minutes. So I would just say if you're excited about like the role you're interviewing for, and you think you're a strong candidate, then like just represent that in your energy and how you present yourself and how you're speaking. Just have a little bit of excitement and passion about it. That really kind of helps engage your interviewer as well.
Absolutely. That's a great addition too. Because you don't want to, if you're not excited about what you're currently doing, it's very hard to visualize how this person's going to be in your role working for you, excited about what you're selling. So yeah, that is great advice. Maggie, what about you?
Yeah, I would say, I think what both Megan and Lauren mentioned, I would echo both for sure. I think specifically, oftentimes interviewers will add parameters like Megan mentioned of like in 60 seconds or less, or in 5 minutes or less. I think it's super important that if there are those parameters, you stick to them, because we're looking at that as, can you take direction? Can you take coaching and apply it? And if you don't, that's kind of a red flag. So I think that's just something I wanted to highlight, as well as the energy. Definitely agree on that with Lauren, because it's a first impression, and first impressions, a lot of times, whether we like to admit it or not, we make judgments, in the first couple minutes, the first 60 seconds. So it's just important to practice that, right? Practice you're about you, and make sure that you're telling a story. If it's your one chance to kind of tell about yourself, something that is memorable, or, why you're here. You want them to remember it, right? You want it to kind of impress them a little bit, but make it succinct. So I think practicing is definitely key to that. Tell me about yourself.
Absolutely. Liz, anything to add here? I know we covered a ton of ground.
Yeah, just the only thing I will add is like, don't be afraid to ask a clarifying question, right? That question that we talked about can be asked in many different ways. I've heard, tell me about yourself, tell me about your background. Like, let's start with you. Don't be afraid to say, hey, Mr. or Mr. Interviewee, like, just so I answer in the right format, like, what are you looking to understand? Do you like me to walk through background of my role? Are you looking to understand me as a person? I think we can all appreciate there's been interviews where we've asked a question and then we haven't got the answer we're looking for. And then on the flip side, we're trying to guess what the interviewee wants to hear. We're like, do they want to know about my past roles? Do they want to know about my dog, Rosie? Right? Like, what are they looking for? So I would say, don't be afraid to ask a clarifying question so you feel really confident in the answer that you're providing to that question.
Absolutely. And way to tout your discovery skills as well. Like, what a great way. That is them, your interviewer, visualizing what it's going to be like to have you on a sales call if someone's giving you a response, rather than you just saying yes and jotting down the notes. You're going to actually dig in and try to do some discovery work. So absolutely love that. Very well stated. And we're going to move into, I think, another area that as women sometimes is challenging for us. And this is one that's come up a lot in women in sales. And we've had a lot of really cool ideas get thrown around. So I always recommend for anybody that's not in the community, come on over. But when we're talking about in interviews, what is the best way to document and recap accomplishments? I know for some of us, we have a really hard time just talking about, like, even if we went to President's Club, we hit quota, we did all these cool things. We don't want to seem icky. So we kind of cover, go a little too covert with those things. And I think for especially for the members of our community, I want to make sure we have those front and center and we're really owning all those accomplishments. So for each of you, as you think about interviewees, how can they best document and recap and showcase those accomplishments in a way that's going to be meaningful? And Lauren, let's start with you for this question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing, we've kind of reiterated this already in a couple of other questions, but one thing that really helps here, and I can certainly tell when someone has done this, is prepping in advance how you're going to highlight those accomplishments. So what I like to do is make like a PowerPoint almost, or like a Google Slides with just like bullet points of my accomplishments. And I think the key point that you have to highlight is, why you're highlighting that accomplishment, right? Like, not just that you did this, but like, what is it about that accomplishment that shows that you're a good fit here? Like, what did you do as part of that accomplishment to make it an accomplishment for you? And I think to help with that, making that bulleted list, like as if you're going to put a slideshow together on yourself, on your accomplishments, can really help you kind of tailor that and make sure you're delivering those accomplishments in a concise way. And it doesn't come over the top as overly confident or anything like that, especially if there's anything that you learned as part of those accomplishments. That's a good thing to bring into why you're highlighting that accomplishment and adding to your bulleted list that you're going to present on yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Maggie, what about you?
I think that's a great idea that Lauren had. And it shows that you maybe went the extra mile too. If you create like a 1 to 2 slide PowerPoint about, why Lauren, or why Maggie, or, why Liz, to just kind of help sell yourself, right? I know it's very hard to sell yourself. And oftentimes as women, we don't necessarily feel as maybe comfortable as sometimes men can in doing that. And so just making sure, whether it's weaving it in at the beginning, the tell me about yourself question, or whether it's weaving it into an answer that you give, like if there's a question on, tell me about a deal you lost or whatnot, making sure you turn it around into I struggled with this deal, but ultimately, we turned it around. And then that year I made President's Club, or I made Winner's Circle. And we've been able to kind of weave it in that way as well.
Absolutely. Very good advice. Liz, what about you?
Yeah, I think those were both great points. One pattern that I'm seeing more is people sending me PowerPoint slides before the interview. And that's a really great way to set themselves apart. Like Maggie said, just 1 to 2 slides. What does it allow? It gives me context headed into the interview. And then I, as the interviewee, typically dig in, right? It provides me, you know, a base level of some accomplishments. And then I use that to say, hey, tell me about President's Club. Like, what did you do that led to this success? So I actually find I'm more hyper aware of the people that have started to send through their accomplishments prior to my interview. So just, again, going back to my first point about preparedness and controlling the things that you can in an interview, I think that's something I've seen more of a pattern around, and it's really setting people apart.
Absolutely. Absolutely agreed. And friendly reminder too, to make sure all of this is front and center on your LinkedIn as well. That is another place at which your interviews are going to be looking there. You can look at my example on LinkedIn and my own profile. You'll see some of my past sales roles. All of the data points are front and center. Everything starts with a percentage or an award or whatever that was. Highly recommend that, because you don't want people to have to like dig through there to figure out what your accomplishments are. You want it to be just very easy for them to see and note, like, okay, this person overperformed to quota. They were X top sales rep. You know, this is really important information. And that's a really good way to kind of like soften talking about yourself too, because your interviewer is already going to know some of that information and it's going to come up organically in the interview. So it's going to be that much easier to talk about it if you're someone that gets a little shy about it. So Megan, what about you? Any other advice or any other thoughts here?
I would agree with everything that was said so far. I love a slide deck. I think sending that like 24, 48 hours in advance so your interviewer has time to review it is great. Easier said than done sometimes, but don't feel weird bragging. This is your time to brag. We don't know all of your accomplishments. So it's crucial that I don't want to say brag, but it's crucial that you talk about your accomplishments. So don't feel weird. You're not doing it in vain. You're doing it to portray that you are, the right candidate for the role. And then lastly, I would say give context to your accomplishments. Did you hit 90% of quota, but the role average is 80%? Well, that's very different than, hitting 90% of quota, but role average is 110. President's Club or Winner's Circle or whatever your company calls it, how many people were selected for that? Like, what does that mean? Especially external interviews. Sometimes we don't know a lot about, what that award means or how you were chosen for it, who decided on that. So I think giving context helps us understand what those accomplishments really mean.
Absolutely. Such great advice here. We are getting some really good Q&A, so I'm chomping at the bit, but we're going to leave it. We're going to leave it until we get towards the end of the conversation, but please keep submitting your questions. There are some really good ones in here that I'm excited for us to dig into. As we move forward here, I think this is a part of the conversation I'm really interested in selfishly, and that is around each of your favorite interview questions and what information you're actually trying to understand when you ask those, because we all know like there's so many of these like crazy interview questions, like what animal would you be, or just these off the wall kind of questions, but there's a lot of like regular sales questions that happen too. Things about why do you lose a deal, and what did you learn from that? So I think it's important for us to understand why these questions are being asked, what type of information the interviewer is trying to gather, and how you should think about answering those as an interviewee, because it doesn't always have to be like the perfect answer. Like, it's okay to kind of show your human side too. So if you all can speak to this a little bit more, let's start with you, Maggie, for this one.
Yeah, I actually usually don't do the fun, tell me about your, what animal you would be. I usually stay away from those kinds of questions, to be honest with you. So mine might be a more boring question. But mine is tell me about a deal you lost, because I learn a lot from that. I learn, if I ask you to tell me about a deal you lost, I'm looking, and especially if I say, tell me about a recent deal that you lost, I want to, again, make sure that, can you take direction? Like, was it a somewhat recent deal? Or was it a deal from 10 years ago? Like, in your career? Like, I want to know that not only were you growing 10 years ago or 5 years ago, but that you're still constantly growing. You're still constantly having a growth mindset. So I look at, can you take that direction, and do you have that growth mindset? And it's everyone loses deals. It's part of sales. And so I want to know, can you be honest and open about a deal that you lost? Like, are you going to be open and honest as an employee? Are we going to have that trust there? So those are some of the things that I look for, as well as, do they take ownership and of the lost deal, and identify learnings from that. And instead of just like maybe blaming it on something that was out of their control or others, I want to, you know, make sure that it's something that was learned and an internal growth area from that lost deal.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a really good question Shara shared in the chat here. What would happen at work that would make you feel down or deflated when you get home? I think that's such a great question. Like, these are the types of questions that really get into the meat and the core of who you are as an individual, which is the purpose of asking these questions in the first place during interviews. I think there's a misconception oftentimes that it's like these questions are meant to be asked as gotchas to screw you up. It's not. It's to see how you act and react to different things, to see how you're going to be as an employee at the company. So yeah, keep posting some of these examples because these are really cool, like some of the ones I saw in chat. Liz, what about you? What are some of your favorite questions and what information are you trying to surmise from those answers?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite questions is, what's the catalyst to your success, and, what's setting you apart from your peers? I think I come across a ton of account executives and sales managers that are really high performing. And I want to know the self-reflection they're doing to understand like what makes them successful, right? What's your superpower? What's setting you apart from your peers day in, day out? And I think it's really important that we're able to articulate that clearly. As a leader, if I feel high confidence that you know what's going to make you, what makes you successful, there's a high probability you'll be able to replicate that again here, right? Because what makes you successful at your current job is likely going to make you equally successful at this net new job. And so that's one of my favorite questions to ask. And it always surprises me, myself included, as high performing people, we need to reflect often on what's making us successful. Like, what's our superpower? Reflect how we're looking versus our peers. What are the things that I'm doing that my peers aren't doing that's making me more successful than them? And then being able to articulate that in an interview, I think is really powerful. So yeah, that's my favorite question. If we ask Cristiano Ronaldo, like, what makes him, one of the best soccer players in the world, I bet he'll be able to articulate that, immediately. And so it gives us high probability when he's moving from team to team that he's able to replicate that success anywhere he goes. And it's the same is true for us. And that's what I'm betting for when I'm interviewing, whether it be account executives or sales managers.
Absolutely. Megan, what about you?
Yeah, so kind of similar to Liz's, but maybe the opposite. I like to ask, what would you do if you joined and, halfway through the quarter, you were pacing dramatically behind? What would be the steps that you would take? I find a lot of people that I interview who are top performers maybe haven't failed yet in their role. They haven't had like a really bad quarter and come back from it. And I want to see that grit, that even if you are pacing behind or if you miss quota, are you just going to give up and, say, okay, it's not going to work out here, I need to find a new job? Or are you going to, have a long list of things that you're going to try to, do to solve that problem there? So similar to Liz's there of, like what kind of identifying what about their process is going to, continue their success, even if it's not immediate, and how are they going to persevere through that?
Absolutely. Lauren, take us home. What questions do you like? What are your favorites? What are you trying to determine from those answers?
Yeah, I mean, learning some really great questions here. They're awesome. But at Samsara, one of our values is obsessing over the customer. So one thing that I always like to ask, and this really can apply anywhere, right, is to tell me about a time that you went above and beyond for a customer or for a particular project. This shows me a lot of things with that answer. It's what's their true passion and motivation when it comes to working with customers, what's their approach and thought process to what, how they can level up and how they can be a game changer for a customer and make our product a game changer. And it also can show your initiative, right? Like asking that question can give you an opportunity to say, here are the things that I thought of and here's what I did, the steps I did to go above and beyond. And it really can show a lot on how much initiative you have and how organized you are there. And then lastly, it can also show like storytelling, right? So it's a big part for me is that you can tell a story because, we're constantly having to tell stories in sales, and that answer is a great opportunity for you to tell a story. And that's a really good opportunity to kind of capture a lot of information in that one question. So it's typically my favorite and usually one of my first questions.
Love it. Thank you so much. As we're speaking about questions here, reminder, we have a Q&A tab. If you have questions, be sure to post them there. And we need your help if you're in the audience. If you can actually upvote the questions that you want us to answer, we have so many that we're not going to get through all of them today. So we'll take some of these questions into the Women in Sales Slack community later on, but upvote the questions that you really want answered during the course of this conversation so that we can make sure to prioritize those and keep them coming. So we're going to pivot. We're going to switch sides of the table, which is the other part of the conversation I was looking forward to. As the interviewee, what questions do you like to hear asked of you as the interviewer? So we're going to the other side of the table. And I think this will be helpful because I think there's the age old one of like, what's the company culture? And I feel like everybody just gets gridlock and stuck on that. So would love to hear some of the questions that you all are getting in interviews that really either like catch your attention, get you excited, have made you want to move a candidate forward. So Liz, let's kick off with you for this one.
Yeah, I think the best questions at the end of an interview are the ones that are, lead with general curiosity and then show early on your preparedness. The best questions I've been asked are like, hey, I read XYZ article about Samsara. This really stood out to me. Like, how do you envision strategy changing because of XYZ? Right? Or, hey, I saw on LinkedIn you're hiring a lot in this region. Like, tell me more about why that's growing. So the best questions that are asked at the end of the interview are one, like lead with general curiosity, but two, also show me that you're looking, beyond our website and you're thinking more deeply about the company, our customers, the market, and potentially the growth trajectory.
Absolutely agreed. Megan, what about you?
I would say, so this kind of goes a little bit into the close portion of the interview, but I think as you're interviewing in a sales role, it is looked at a bit of like, this is how you are going to sell. And I've had a couple of people ask, after asking if I have any hesitations on them, following up with like, do you have any beige flags or do you have anything that like could be a little bit better, and really getting to the root of like, if I do have any hesitations there or anything that could be a little bit better. I love that because I find with my reps on their demos, that's a really important question to ask. It's not just about like, okay, did we check all your boxes as a provider, but are we your favorite? Are you excited about us? Is there anything that could be a little bit better? So I really like that. And I honestly, sometimes I'll come up with things that I maybe wasn't going to say, or I was 50-50 on if I should bring up, but then they ask that and it gives you an opportunity. It's always good to have those out on the table. You'd rather own it and be able to overcome those objections than them just be in your interviewer's head. So I always love that question.
Yes, love it. Lauren, what about you?
Yeah, one of my favorites is probably when they ask me about the skills and traits and things that I see that team members I have today do that are the most successful team members on the team. Like, what are the traits and skills that those people have that are outperforming others on the team, the ones that are standing out, because it really shows that they're really motivated to do well here. They're a go-getter, that they're also wanting to learn, right? Like, some of those traits and skills might be things that they're not used to doing today, and it gives them an opportunity to say, okay, like, yeah, that's something I'm really excited to learn about, or I, maybe can showcase that they are learning about that. So it shows that curiosity, but also willing to learn and the motivation that I'm really looking for to be in the role and do well.
Mm-hmm. Maggie, anything else to add? You feel like some good questions?
Not too much. I think I would echo both of what Liz and Lauren mentioned. And also, I thought that was a great idea that Megan mentioned, because I had never thought about like basically double clicking into if there are any reservations when you're kind of closing out an interview. But yeah, I think just making sure your questions show that you did your research, that you were prepared, whether it's on the company and or the person that you're interviewing with, and making sure that it's something that shows you're trying to be a top performer. So kind of work backwards from that to, as you kind of formulate your questions, it really shows that you're trying to be a top performer and you're coming into it prepared and that you really want the role.
Absolutely. Absolutely agreed. And remember, this is your opportunity to also see how this interviewer is going to perform as your leader. So that's part of this, is so you can get to know them as well, even though you're the one interviewing. So highly recommend asking even some of the flip opposites of those questions. Like, hey, your team probably hasn't won every single deal this quarter. Can you tell me about one of the deals that your team lost and how you actually coached that rep around overcoming that, especially if it was like a big loss for them? Those are great insights to figure out what that person's going to be like, how they lead, and how they coach their reps. So I think these are all wonderful suggestions. If others have ideas, drop them in the chat because we're sharing information here. This is a community. So we are going to pivot shortly over to the Q&A. So thank you for everyone that's been upvoting those questions. We're going to go somewhere else in this conversation first, though, which is one of the frequent questions that comes up a lot in Women in Sales, and that's around the pitfalls of interviews. You all are conducting interviews regularly. Can you tell us some of the places where you see the train just go off the tracks? You see the conversation derail. You see reps kind of get stuck when they're in the interview. Just help us understand where some of those corners are so that we can peek behind them and avoid them in our own interviews. And Megan, let's start with you for this one.
Again, not to sound like a broken record, but I look at like the way that you interview is very similar to the way that you're going to sell. So is this a conversation or is this I'm asking a question, which then prompts a monologue? Obviously you're going to be doing a lot of the talking as the interviewee. But that's one thing, is just like keeping it on track. I like to use, I saw it in the chat, but the STAR method is a good way to just make sure that your answers are being succinct and you're not going, way off on a tangent. I think that that's important. And yeah, just remembering overall that you are trying to sell yourself. You're not just answering the questions, but you're trying to make your interviewer comfortable taking a risk and comfortable hiring you at the end of the day. So trying to tie everything back to that.
Absolutely. Lauren, what about you?
Would 100% double down on the STAR method. Like long-winded answers, monologue is definitely a huge red flag for me. So using that situation, task, action, result, like putting it in a structure like that can really, really help. The other big pitfall that I see kind of intertwined with that is constantly using the word we when you're telling about some stories or accomplishments that you have, just saying we, or being very vague about the team did this or our company did this. I want to hear what you did. I want to hear specifically what actions you took, what skills you brought to the table, value you brought to the table, not just we. It's the time to be a little bit more, a little bit more selfish and be a little bit more confident about like what you can do. If you're using we the entire time, I usually note that down. Like, what exactly did you do? Or I'm going to pry that apart. I'm going to ask more questions as to what you did. So it'd be great, just to start off the bat, like, what did you do in that story and that accomplishment?
Absolutely. Great advice there. Maggie, what about you?
Yeah, I would say some pitfalls that I see are, in addition to the monologue and being too long-winded, is not having specific examples or details in a story or a situational question. So we definitely want to see your energy and your excitement for the role come through, but we don't want to be too vague in our responses, such as like, we're super strategic, we work really hard. Like, you want to have an example of how we were strategic, how you applied XYZ skill. So I think just making sure and thinking through, like, I know interviews are a stressful time. It can be nerve-wracking. So just the nice thing about interviews is it's a time to reflect and figure out like, what are some examples? What are some situations where I experienced this or where I experienced that? And it's kind of a nice time to look back and be like, oh yeah, that was a difficult situation, but I did actually learn quite a bit from it. And so I think just also on the nervousness or the monologue piece, we all get nervous. We all can go on a tangent sometimes. And so I think thinking about some strategies to avoid that are things like a power pose before an interview, like standing up, putting your hands on your hips, kind of like Superman or Superwoman. Like, that's been known to really get folks feeling powerful. It's some psychological thing. I couldn't tell you more than that, other than doing the power pose and like taking some deep breaths, like very deep breaths in your abdomen. And so those are just some strategies to try to avoid the monologue or the long-winded answers.
Excellent advice. Yes, we love a power pose here at Women in Sales. So yeah, rock that. Liz, what about you?
Yeah, I would double down on everything that's already been said. I think to Megan's earlier point about kind of monologues, one kind of pitfall that I see people do is apologize after a monologue. And to Megan's earlier point on, hey, we are evaluating the way you're communicating with us is a similar vein to how you communicate with customers. I find that when people do go on monologues, I get a lot of like, oh God, sorry, did I speak too much? And, this kind of like backtracking and like kind of lack of confidence. So just owning it, if you want to make a comment about it and say, hey, I'm now going to course correct. I appreciate that was, probably longer than what you anticipated. Like, I'm going to make my answers a little bit more succinct moving forward. So I think just owning it and then course correcting would be the best way to ensure that you have enough time to answer all the questions. And then just the other pitfall I see is people answering questions not authentically, but particularly in the way what they think the interviewer wants to hear. I'll give you an example. I'll ask, I'm betting, is this person a lifelong learner? Like, what do you do outside of your day-to-day to upskill yourself in the art of sales? And I think people typically want me to hear that they read books on sales or listen to podcasts. And then when I dig in and say, what's the last, sales book you read? People find themselves on the back foot. Now, I'm not asking that to catch you out. I'm asking that out of genuine curiosity. But if you're not reading books and you're not listening to podcasts, maybe you're doing something else. And so I would say lean into what feels authentic and the actual activities and examples you're doing, and not what you believe the interviewer wants to hear. So those would be my 2 tips on the kind of skirting around some pitfalls.
Great advice here. So much good stuff. We are going to take all these learnings somehow and distill them and bring them back to the community because we have covered so much ground. One of my favorite things I talked about in an interview was they asked a question about like, how do I practice and get more comfortable for sales? I was like, I talk to every Lyft and Uber driver. I am a chatty Lyft and Uber driver. If I'm in an elevator, I'm talking to the person in the elevator. I am like that obnoxious person. If you are in my vicinity, I'm going to talk to you. I'm not pitching you necessarily, but it gets you more comfortable talking. And interviewers love that. They were like, that's so cool that you talk to your Uber driver. It's not always these really in-depth, like I read 18 books last month. Like they're not always looking for those kind of answers. They want to see that you're a human being. So don't be afraid to lean into that and to talk about some of that. We are nearing the end of this conversation, which is crazy. I feel like the time flew by. So I'm going to go down the line for some of the Q&A questions with ones that had more upvotes. So Cora's was the most upvoted question. Congratulations, Cora. And this is for any of you to answer. So we'll just kind of whoever feels most comfortable taking this question. What questions should we be asking during interviews to suss out companies that don't fit our personal values or those that want diverse candidates but haven't fixed sales culture to have an inclusive culture? Incredible question. Let me also here, I can actually highlight it on the screen so that you guys can see it a little bit easier too. Anyone have thoughts on this, like how to kind of suss out the companies that might not be aligned with our personal values or care about diversity initiatives?
I have been asked before, and I like this question, like, what is the last time that I forget exactly how I was asked, but what's the last time that leadership has made a change based off feedback that you got from like one of the reps or, something along those lines to see, are they actually taking feedback and are they implementing it? That'd probably be the best answer I have for that.
Yeah. I think too, also asking questions around, programs that they have in place today. A lot of programs have employee resource groups. That's a good indication of like, these are companies that are investing back in their employees and allowing for spaces. So definitely ask about that, or if they have any specific programming that they've done. If you're a woman in sales, maybe ask, like, do you guys have a program? Samsara is a perfect example. They would easily say, yeah, we actually have a partnership with Women in Sales. We do quarterly content together with their team, and we share ongoing job opportunities. They have such a great answer for that. And you're going to be able to tell that really easily when you're talking to companies. So don't be afraid to ask some of those questions and better understand what their culture is like. Because again, that's you doing discovery as a sales rep. So it's a win-win. Any more thoughts on this one? Otherwise, we have plenty more. So I'm going to keep us rolling. Cool. All right, we're going to the next one. This one, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. I believe it's Martalea. Asked, I'm transitioning into tech sales after building a career in wholesale distribution sales, and I'm aiming for an AE role. What advice do you have for candidates coming from outside the tech world to quickly ramp up and add value at Samsara? Good question.
at least from my perspective, I think that someone transitioning to this, something that's really going to help, and we talked about this earlier, is really taking some time researching the product itself, because that's where a lot of the innovation and the technical components are that are going to be different than maybe what you're used to. And it's not just like what's on the company website, but go beyond that, and research, like look at YouTube videos, see what our customers are saying about our technology and seeing what their feedback is. Go to some of our our widespread, our public support, support articles and knowledge base, and kind of see how we guide customers on technology, how we're training our customers on the technology, what are some of the concerns that we might get from customers, what are the value areas. I think just kind of spending a little bit more time in the details of the product itself can really help with that.
Absolutely. All right. We have one more Q&A question that we're going to go to, and then we're going to close on closing the interview, because that's very important. That's a big part of this conversation, so we can't miss that. So we're going to kind of rapid fire this next question, whoever wants to take it. This is from Margaret. Hi, my pilot program ends tomorrow unless I can get on another program. How do I explain that I'm not with my current company any longer in interviews? And really on a broad level, like if someone's not with a company any longer, should they be honest about that essentially in the interview?
I think yes, like it's going to come up. I think hiding it looks worse than being more proactive about it, because you're just coming kind of out and saying, your current situation. It's better to just kind of get ahead of it than it is to try to hide it.
I would agree, right? If we're all going to be in sales the next 20, 30 years, there's going to be times we're going to be out of work. It's just the name of the game, right? Being comfortable and confident articulating that we might not be with this company right now, but we're very excited looking for XYZ next opportunity. I think in sales, it's like challenging our customers and getting comfortable asking, uncomfortable questions. It's the same thing in an interview. The more that you own it and the more comfortable you are talking about it, the more at ease the interviewer is going to feel that it is a non-issue. So I would say own it, articulate it well, and also pair it with your excitement to explore new opportunities like the company that you're interviewing for.
Absolutely. And articulate what you're doing with your time if you're not currently working. Be able to speak to how you're properly utilizing your time, if you're in communities, if you're attending events, if you're upskilling, all good stuff to talk about. So thank you so much. We're going to do one final question to rapid fire. But before we do that, take a look at the open jobs link from Samsara. I dropped it in the chat once again. They have over 169 roles. I think the last time I checked, in 62 locations, multiple departments. They are hiring like crazy constantly. So please apply to these roles. Their team would love to hear from you. And we'd love to see more of our members land roles on the Samsara team selfishly. So yeah, please apply. And we are going to close this on the most appropriate note, which is closing the interview. So we're going to go around. We have 2 minutes left, so 30 seconds apiece. Let us know what is your top tip for closing the interview, or what advice do you have on how people can successfully close the interview? And Megan, let's start with you for this one.
Yeah. So first of all, I would say a close in general is better than no close. Even if it's like a little bit of a weak close, I at least you're closing. So even if you're not feeling 100% or feel a little awkward about it, I know it can feel a little weird. Just do it. It's better than not closing at all. And I would say just really simply the way simple structure to follow is restate why you're excited about the job, restate why you would be a very good candidate for the job and why you think they should hire you. And then just close by asking if they have any hesitations. And then bonus points if you go back to the beige flags thing that I said earlier to really double down on it if you have extra time. But just that's the simple structure I would follow.
Love it. Lauren, what about you?
Yeah, definitely echo that. And I would also say 100% follow it up with a thank you email as well. Sometimes we're interviewing tons of people, and it's, something that can really set you apart, and it just shows the motivation and passion for the role. So closing the interview, but also send a little blurb afterwards. Nothing super lengthy, but definitely send a thank you note. It can definitely set you apart.
Love it. Maggie, what about you?
Nothing more to say. I think otherwise, then just just make sure you ask the question, however way you do it at the end. We're looking for it. We're expecting it. So please ask it.
Go for the close. I love it. Liz, what about you? Anything else to add?
No, we covered it. I think it's really, at Samsara, it's something we really do look at. Particularly, it doesn't surprise me that we're all pretty aligned in what we're looking for, right? What are we looking for? The way that you would close a potential customer is what we expect you to close in an interview. To double down on Megan's point around excitement, that goes a long way. Like, reiterating how excited you are about the potential opportunity is something that I don't hear enough. And I leave those interviews where that is articulated well, having a really good feeling that they're as excited about Samsara as I am excited about them to be a good fit for the team.
Absolutely love this. What a great discussion. Thank you so much to each of you for being part of this panel. Thank you, Samsara, for teaming up with Women in Sales throughout this entire year to bring so much good content, valuable resources to our community members. We are incredibly grateful. And thank you all in the audience for being part of today's discussion. We appreciate each and every one of you. And we hope to see you in the Women in Sales community. So thank you all. We'll see you at the next event.
Thanks, everyone.